It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and joining us to talk about the handy little guide to adoration is Michelle Jones Schroeder. Thanks for being here, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me, Kyle.
I love in your bio, it says that you and your husband of 21 years have two hilarious children who keep you entertained and exhausted. What's something that your children have done that is hilarious?
Oh, wow. I could probably write a whole book about that. They've done, those typical embarrassing things like screaming, "I want donuts," right as Mass was ending when they were real little. Those typical Catholic young family things that kids often do. And now they're a little bit older. My son is 15, and his hilarity is a little more sophisticated now, but he is forever outsmarted by my 11-year-old daughter, who they're like a comedy team, and he's the straight guy, and she's forever just getting him, and he has no idea. So that's really fun to watch.
Yeah, my kids are asking, how many more songs at Mass? That's like their countdown.
Right.
So you wrote this little book it's the handy little guide, Adoration. How often do you try to make it to adoration?
I typically go once a week, and I try to go twice a week if possible. And that sort of just depends on schedule. But it's such an amazing experience for me that I wish I could arrange my schedule so that I could go every day, to be honest with you.
So I'd like you to explain what adoration is, but I imagine in that description you would describe the Eucharist at some point. So maybe let's start at the very beginning here. What is the Eucharist, and then how does that lead to adoration?
Well, and I differentiate this in the booklet because the Eucharist is part of the celebration of Mass, obviously. The Eucharist is the living Christ. Mm-hmm. And during Mass, we're celebrating that communion with him within our community of faith. So that's an experience that obviously is crucial for all of us as Catholics. Adoration is more private, it's more quiet, it's more one-on-one time. And it's not a sacrament, it doesn't replace Mass or anything like that. It's really just free time to be in the presence of the living Christ, which is really incredible when you think about the fact that we have that opportunity as Catholics.
And when's the first time that you experienced that?
Well, I had walked by that Adoration Chapel many, many, many times. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I ventured in. And part of the reason it took me so long to go in there was because I really wasn't sure what I was going to find when I opened the door. If I was going to be walking in on something that was happening and I wasn't going to fit in or know what I was doing. It was just an uncertainty, which I kind of knew in my mind what it was, but there was still sort of this trepidation about going in and sitting there with the Lord. And I had been experiencing a lot of stress. There had been a large flood actually in my area. And while I wasn't personally affected, my parents were, a lot of my friends were. It was a very stressful time, and I needed peace and quiet and God all combined into one. So I went in.
And what was your experience?
Well, it was just an amazing sense of peace, I think, was the first thing that really struck me. And it was that not just feeling and not just knowing, but a combination of feeling and knowing that you were truly in the presence of Christ there in the Eucharist, and just having an overwhelming sense that everything was going to be okay after that. That you can kind of get through anything after you spend some time one-on-one with him. So it was something I just immediately became enamored with the concept, and then I started delving more and more into it and learning more about it as I went along.
And in your book, you talk about it not just being the knowing that this is Jesus present in the Eucharist, but feeling that. Do you think that's different from one person to another, having a feeling? Because I feel like I've been to adoration quite a bit, and I've never had a feeling that this is something special, but I do believe without a doubt that it is.
Well, and that it probably is something that's a little bit different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I think once you do it regularly and you try to put yourself in different situations, I think a lot of us feel like, oh, I can't go in there, I'm in a bad mood. I can't go in there, I'm not particularly holy today. I probably need to go to confession. And that's really not the case. Jesus wants us in there. And I think maybe once we break down some of those barriers that we're putting up in our minds, maybe the feeling will come. I mean, maybe not. But for me, it was palpable.
We're talking with Michelle Jones Schroeder about the handy little guide to adoration. And this really is a little guide. I mean, it's definitely could fit in your back pocket. Looks like it's 61 pages here, including a couple blank pages in there, too, that you could take notes if you wanted. What made you want to put this little guide together?
Well, it's crazy. I left Adoration one day and just felt like I was supposed to come home and write down some thoughts. I've invited people to go with me to Adoration, especially people who were kind of struggling with something or having a tough time. And sometimes they would get kind of squirmy and feel like, oh, I don't know. So I was thinking about that one day, I guess, and I came home and I just felt like I was supposed to write something down about it, and I ended up typing for hours. So
accidentally typed up a 64-page booklet.
Exactly.
Why do you think more people don't go to Adoration?
Well, it's not something, as far as my experience, and those are the people I know, it's not something that we're really taught. Even if you went to Catholic school, it's not, certainly when I was growing up, not something that was explained or taught to us. And I think a lot of people just don't know what it is. I think if more people understood it and realized that you could go in there no matter what state of mind you were in, people would be flocking to it a lot more.
And what have been some of the spiritual benefits of Adoration for you, or maybe for people that you've known?
Oh, well, I think the quiet time with Jesus really helps you to focus your prayers. I think that God can communicate with you, of course, in the quiet of your mind. And so many of us have trouble quieting our minds, especially today with being connected, 24/7 to everything. So I think a lot of times people feel like God's not answering their prayers when he probably is. We're just not hearing him. And I think that in adoration, you have that ability to quiet yourself, even if you have to imagine something or focus on a mental image or something like that. You have a better chance, at least, of quieting yourself to hear God's answer, to feel that nudge in a certain direction.
And I know you have a lot of tips in here for people whenever they're going to adoration. What would be some of those that you would suggest for somebody that either is nervous about going or has never gone to adoration, doesn't really understand what it is, or even somebody that has been and just doesn't feel like they're getting anything out of it?
Well, I think if you've never been, probably one of the most comforting ways to approach it is to go in there with something to read, some spiritual book or something like that, maybe the Lives of the Saints, something that would inspire you, and sit there and read at first, just to sort of get a feeling, get your bearings about the experience. And from there, I really think it just depends on what's going on in your mind and what you need to unload, really, to Jesus. And from there, you can read the Bible, you can just sit there and talk with him, you can say prayers or different litanies, or there's a million different things. But I think it more has to do with how you're walking in the door and what's in your heart at that moment. Yeah.
And then once you're sitting down, do you have any other suggestions on when you're dealing with distractions on how to stay focused? Or maybe should we indulge some of those distractions?
Well, that is really something I struggle with, because I have this recurring dream that I'm the Adoration Chapel librarian shushing everyone, because sometimes people will, they're praying, but they're kind of whispering as they're praying. And, you can hear, especially when a room's really quiet, right, you can kind of hear everything. And so then I remind myself, okay, what would Jesus do? But I think that a lot of times we just have to, we live in a world with other people, and everybody's not going to be quiet 100% of the time. So we just have to pray for those people and hope that they will remember to turn their cell phone off next time.
Yeah. So one of the things that you suggest is to go to adoration for an hour a week, or maybe if you have to split that up to a couple half an hour or something like that. Why do you think that's important?
Well, when you read the gospel, of course, Jesus asked, can you spend 1 hour with me, to his apostles? So I think that's probably where the whole hour of adoration idea comes from. But everybody's in different stages of their life, depending on what season you're in. That may not be doable, but breaking it up, or even just stopping in for a few minutes to say hello and to be there in the presence of Jesus is a great start. And then, different seasons of your life, you may be able to make a larger commitment.
And as far as your book goes, who would you recommend this for? Because it's, like I mentioned, it's small, could fit in your pocket. You could take it with you to adoration. I imagine churches that have an adoration chapel might want to get these in bulk and have them sitting out and available for people to take for free. Who would be a good person to either buy this for themselves, or who would be a good person to give it to as a gift?
Well, really, I think as far as gifts, people going through RCIA, I think, would really appreciate this, because, again, this just isn't something that's sort of in the curriculum for Catholics. So I think this would be a lovely way to introduce new Catholics to this adoration process. And I really think for anyone who's walked past an adoration chapel door and wondered, I wonder what's going on in there, or I wonder if I should go in there, it would be a wonderful way to make you feel at ease. And that was the whole point, to encourage people to go to adoration, to make them feel comfortable. It's very layperson to layperson written. So it's really just to encourage people to go to adoration. So if you are an adorer, then it'd be great to give to some of your friends who maybe don't quite understand what's going on in that room.
All right. And where can people get a copy of the book?
You can get it from our Sunday Visitor. Their website is osb.com, and it's also available on Amazon.
All right. Again, it's called The Handy Guide to Adoration from Michelle Jones Schroeder. Thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us today, for putting together this little guide, and for sharing it with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.